Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Droning Professor. Tonight's lesson is about why people love being scared. Now, as always, take a moment for some deep breaths, letting your mind and body relax for a good night of sleep. So, as you make yourselves comfortable, please take a moment to let us know where you're listening from, and feel free to subscribe. Before we dive into today's topic, let me ask you a quick question by show of hands. How many of you have willingly paid money to be terrified in the past year? Movie tickets for horror films? Haunted house admissions? Skydiving lessons? Interesting. Now keep your hands up if you enjoyed the experience and would do it again. For those of you still with your hands raised, congratulations. You're part of one of humanity's most fascinating psychological paradoxes. Today, we're exploring why rational, intelligent people like yourselves actively seek out experiences that trigger our most primal survival mechanism, fear. It's a topic that touches on evolutionary biology, neuroscience, social psychology, and yes, even economics, because the fear industry is worth billions of dollars annually. By the end of this lesson, you'll understand the complex neurobiological mechanisms that make fear both terrifying and thrilling, the evolutionary advantages of our relationship with controlled fear, and why your brain literally rewards you for scaring yourself silly. We'll also examine individual differences in fear-seeking behavior and explore some surprising applications of this research. So buckle up, or should I say, brace for impact, as we dive deep into the delightfully dark world of recreational terror. To understand why we love being scared, we first need to understand what fear actually does to our bodies and brains. Fear isn't just an emotion. It's a complex, multi-system response that's been fine-tuned over millions of years of evolution. When you encounter something frightening, whether it's a masked killer in a movie or that particularly challenging professor who shall remain nameless, your brain initiates what neuroscientists call the fear network. This network involves several key structures working in millisecond coordination. The amygdala, two almond-shaped clusters deep in your temporal lobes, serves as your brain's smoke detector. But unlike the one in your dorm room that goes off every time you make toast, the amygdala is incredibly sophisticated. It processes sensory information faster than your conscious mind can recognize what's happening. We're talking about 12 milliseconds from stimulus to response. Research by neuroscientist LeDoux has shown that the amygdala can detect and respond to threats through what he calls the low road, a direct pathway from sensory organs to the amygdala that bypasses conscious processing entirely. This is why you might jump at a shadow before you realize it's just your roommate's laundry hanging on a chair. Once the amygdala sounds the alarm, it triggers the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. Think of this as your body's internal emergency broadcast system. The hypothalamus releases corticotropin-releasing hormone, which signals the pituitary gland to release adrenocorticotropic hormone, which then tells your adrenal glands to flood your system with stress hormones. The star of this chemical cocktail is adrenaline, also called epinephrine, along with its cousin noradrenaline, also called norepinephrine. These hormones create the classic fight-or-flight response that you've all experienced. Increased heart rate, heightened awareness, dilated pupils, and that distinctive feeling of energy coursing through your body. But here's where it gets interesting, and this is crucial to understanding why we seek out fear. This same chemical cascade is responsible for the feelings we associate with excitement, thrill, and euphoria. While your amygdala is screaming, "Danger, danger," and your body is pumping out stress hormones, your prefrontal cortex, the brain's executive center, is trying to make sense of the situation. This is where cognitive appraisal comes in, a process identified by psychologists Richard Lazarus and Susan Folkman. Your prefrontal cortex evaluates the threat. Is it real or fake? Am I actually in danger, or am I safely sitting in a movie theater? This evaluation determines whether the fear response becomes genuine panic or transforms into something more pleasant, excitement. Now here's where the science gets really fascinating. When your prefrontal cortex determines that you're in a safe but exciting situation, what researchers call controlled fear, your brain doesn't just turn off the fear response. Instead, it adds another layer of neurochemical complexity. Dopamine, often mischaracterized as the pleasure chemical, is actually more accurately described as the wanting or motivation chemical. It's released not just when we experience something pleasant, but when we anticipate a reward. In the context of controlled fear, dopamine creates a sense of anticipation and excitement. Studies using neuroimaging have shown that people watching horror films show increased dopamine activity in the brain's reward pathways, particularly in the nucleus accumbens. This is the same brain region that lights up when people use addictive substances or engage in other pleasurable activities. Perhaps even more important are endorphins, your brain's natural morphine. When you're subjected to intense stress or fear, your brain releases these endogenous opioids to help you cope with potential pain and trauma. The fascinating thing is that these endorphins don't just disappear when the threat is gone. They linger, creating a natural high. This is why many people report feeling euphoric and energized after a scary movie or roller coaster ride. You've essentially given yourself a natural drug experience, courtesy of your own neurochemistry. Finally, there's gamma-aminobutyric acid, your brain's primary inhibitory neurotransmitter. After the initial fear response subsides, gamma-aminobutyric acid helps restore balance, creating feelings of relief and relaxation. This neurochemical come-down can be deeply satisfying. It's the psychological equivalent of taking off tight shoes after a long day. Not everyone's brain processes fear the same way, which explains why your roommate loves horror movies while you prefer romantic comedies. Research has identified several factors that influence individual differences in fear processing. Studies of twins have suggested that approximately 40 to 60% of the variance in fear sensitivity is heritable. Specific genetic polymorphisms affect how efficiently your brain processes fear-related neurotransmitters. For example, variations in the COMP gene, which breaks down dopamine, can influence how intensely you experience both fear and excitement. Psychologist Marvin Zuckerman identified a personality trait called sensation seeking, the tendency to seek out novel, intense, and complex experiences. High sensation seekers show different patterns of brain activity in response to scary stimuli, with less activation in areas associated with anxiety and more activation in reward processing regions. Your cultural background and early experiences also shape how your brain responds to fear. Some cultures are more accepting of risk-taking and thrill-seeking behaviors, while others emphasize caution and safety. These cultural messages become literally wired into our neural pathways through a process called neuroplasticity. Now that we understand the neurobiological mechanics of fear, let's examine why evolution gave us this capacity in the first place, and more importantly, why it might have given some of us a taste for controlled terror. Fear, at its core, is a survival mechanism. Our ancestors, who were appropriately afraid of genuinely dangerous situations, predators, heights, darkness, venomous creatures, were more likely to survive and reproduce than those who weren't. This is why we have innate fears of certain stimuli that our species has encountered throughout evolutionary history. Psychologist Martin Seligman proposed the concept of prepared learning, the idea that we're evolutionarily primed to quickly develop fears of certain categories of stimuli. This explains why it's much easier to develop a phobia of snakes or spiders than of cars or electrical outlets, despite the fact that the latter are statistically more dangerous in modern life. Research has consistently shown that humans can develop conditioned fear responses to evolutionarily relevant stimuli, such as snakes, spiders, and angry faces, much more quickly than to modern threats. This suggests our fear system is still calibrated to the dangers our ancestors faced in the African savanna, not the risks of contemporary life. Evolutionary psychologists Randy Nessa and George Williams proposed the smoke detector principle to explain why our fear system seems oversensitive. Just as it's better for a smoke detector to occasionally trigger false alarms than to miss a real fire, it's better for our fear system to respond to many non-threatening situations than to miss a genuine threat. This oversensitivity creates opportunities for false alarms, situations where our fear system activates even though we're not in real danger. These false alarms are exactly what make controlled fear experiences possible and enjoyable. But why would evolution give some people a tendency to seek out frightening experiences? Several theories attempt to explain the adaptive value of voluntary fear exposure. Developed by psychologist Donald Meichenbaum, stress inoculation theory suggests that exposure to manageable stressors can improve our ability to handle real stress in the future. Just as vaccines expose us to weakened pathogens to build immunity, controlled fear experiences might serve as emotional vaccines that strengthen our psychological resilience. Studies have shown that people who regularly engage in thrill-seeking activities often display better stress management skills and lower anxiety levels in their daily lives. They've essentially trained their fear system to be more flexible and responsive rather than rigidly reactive. From an evolutionary perspective, the willingness to engage in risky or frightening activities might serve as a form of social signaling. It demonstrates qualities that would have been valuable in ancestral environments: courage, physical prowess, emotional regulation, and the ability to remain calm under pressure. Research has found that people, particularly males, are more likely to engage in risk-taking behaviors when in the presence of potential romantic partners. The young male syndrome, identified by evolutionary psychologists Martin Daly and Margot Wilson, suggests that risk-taking can be a form of sexual display, a way to demonstrate fitness and attract mates. Shared frightening experiences can also serve important social functions. When people face scary situations together, they often report feeling more connected and bonded afterward. This phenomenon, known as misattribution of arousal, was first demonstrated in a famous study by psychologists Donald Dutton and Arthur Aaron. In their experiment, men who met an attractive woman while crossing a frightening suspension bridge were more likely to call her later than men who met the same woman in a safe setting. The arousal from fear was misattributed as romantic attraction, but the broader principle applies to all kinds of social bonding. Moderate levels of stress and arousal can actually enhance learning and memory formation. The neurochemical changes associated with controlled fear, increased norepinephrine, dopamine, and other neurotransmitters, can improve attention, focus, and memory consolidation. This suggests that seeking out controlled fear experiences might serve as a form of cognitive training, helping people develop better attentional control and emotional regulation skills. Psychologist Paul Rosen coined the term benign masochism to describe the human tendency to enjoy initially negative experiences that our bodies and minds ultimately recognize as safe. This concept helps explain not just our love of being scared, but also our enjoyment of other initially unpleasant experiences like eating spicy food, listening to sad music, or engaging in intense physical exercise. The key word here is benign. These experiences trigger genuine physiological and psychological responses: real fear, real pain, real sadness, but in contexts where our higher-order cognitive processes recognize that we're ultimately safe. This cognitive override is what transforms potentially negative experiences into positive ones. The transformation of fear into enjoyment depends heavily on cognitive appraisal, how we interpret and evaluate our experience. Psychologists have identified several factors that influence whether a frightening experience becomes pleasurable. First, perceived control. When people feel they have some degree of control over the scary situation, they can leave the theater, get off the roller coaster, or close their eyes. They're more likely to enjoy the experience. Second, safety signals. Clear indicators that the threat isn't real. Movie screens, safety harnesses, emergency exits help the prefrontal cortex override the amygdala's alarm signals. Third, social context. Being with others, especially trusted friends or family members, can make scary experiences more enjoyable. The presence of others provides additional safety cues and opportunities for shared emotional regulation. Fourth, voluntary participation. Chosen fear is fundamentally different from imposed fear. When we voluntarily enter scary situations, we maintain a sense of agency that's crucial for enjoyment. Not everyone experiences benign masochism to the same degree. Research has identified several factors that influence individual differences. As mentioned earlier, people high in sensation seeking are more likely to enjoy frightening experiences. They show different patterns of neurological activation in response to intense stimuli, with greater activation in reward processing areas and less activation in threat processing regions. People who are highly sensitive to bodily sensations associated with anxiety, rapid heartbeat, sweating, shortness of breath, are less likely to enjoy scary experiences. They interpret these physical symptoms as threatening rather than exciting, which prevents the cognitive transformation that makes fear enjoyable. Cultural attitudes toward risk, emotion regulation, and thrill-seeking significantly influence individual differences in fear enjoyment. Some cultures encourage emotional restraint and discourage risk-taking, while others celebrate boldness and intensity. There are interesting developmental patterns in fear-seeking. Children and adolescents often show high levels of sensation-seeking, which tends to decrease with age. This pattern aligns with neurobiological development. The prefrontal cortex, which is crucial for risk assessment and impulse control, doesn't fully mature until the mid-20s. One of the most fascinating aspects of our relationship with fear is its profoundly social nature. While fear evolved as an individual survival mechanism, humans have transformed it into a powerful tool for social connection and group bonding. When people experience fear together, their physiological systems begin to synchronize. Heart rates align, breathing patterns match, and stress hormone levels rise in tandem. This physiological synchrony creates a sense of connection and shared experience that can be deeply bonding. Research by psychologist Mauricio Delgado and colleagues has shown that people who experience frightening situations together show increased cooperation and trust afterward. They're more likely to help each other, share resources, and form lasting social bonds. Frightening experiences also provide opportunities for social comparison and mutual emotional regulation. When watching a horror movie with friends, people constantly monitor each other's reactions, using social cues to calibrate their own emotional responses. If your friend seems calm and relaxed during a particularly intense scene, it can help you regulate your own fear response. Conversely, if everyone around you is screaming and jumping, it can amplify your own emotional experience, often in a fun and exciting way. Surviving a scary experience together creates shared narratives that can become central to group identity. Think about how people talk about their experiences at haunted houses, horror movies, or extreme sports activities. These shared stories become part of the group's collective memory and help maintain social bonds over time. Being scared alongside others also provides social validation for our emotional experiences. If everyone in the theater is jumping at the same moments, it confirms that our fear response is appropriate and normal. This social proof can make the fear experience more comfortable and enjoyable. There's also a performative aspect to shared fear experiences. People don't just experience fear together, they perform it for each other. This performance serves several social functions. Fear is highly contagious. When one person in a group shows signs of fear, it rapidly spreads to others through a process called emotional contagion. This contagion can amplify the overall emotional intensity of the experience, making it more thrilling and memorable. How people handle scary situations can influence their social status within a group. Those who remain calm under pressure might gain respect for their courage, while those who show more fear might be seen as sensitive or vulnerable. These social dynamics add another layer of complexity to the fear experience. Cultural norms around gender significantly influence how people express and perform fear. Traditional gender roles often expect men to be stoic and protective during scary situations, while women are permitted or even encouraged to show more emotional reactivity. These gendered expectations can influence both the experience of fear and the social dynamics within scared groups. Research has shown that men often enjoy scary movies more when they're with female companions who show strong fear reactions, possibly because it allows them to fulfill protective social roles. The human love of controlled fear has created a massive global industry worth billions of dollars annually. Understanding the psychology of fear has become crucial for entertainment companies, theme park designers, and marketing professionals. Horror films represent one of the most economically successful film genres, with consistently high return on investment ratios. Low-budget horror films often grossly outperform their production costs because they tap into fundamental psychological drives that guarantee audience engagement. The success of horror films demonstrates several key psychological principles. First, emotional intensity. Horror films create strong emotional experiences that are memorable and shareable. People remember and discuss frightening movies more than many other genres. Second, social experience. Horror films are often consumed in groups, creating shared experiences that amplify both the fear and the enjoyment. The social aspect multiplies the entertainment value. Third, cathartic release. Horror films provide safe outlets for experiencing intense emotions that might be suppressed in daily life. They offer emotional catharsis in controlled environments. The themed entertainment industry has become incredibly sophisticated in its understanding and application of fear psychology. Modern haunted attractions use principles from psychology, neuroscience, and environmental design to create precisely calibrated fear experiences. Professional scare designers employ techniques like startle responses, using sudden noises, movements, or appearances to trigger involuntary startle responses. They build anticipation through environmental cues, music, and pacing. They manipulate sensory experiences by controlling lighting, sound, temperature, and even smells to create immersive, scary environments. And they use psychological profiling, targeting specific fears and phobias that are common across populations. The fear industry has also learned to segment markets based on individual differences in fear tolerance and sensation seeking. Theme parks offer attractions with different intensity levels. Horror films are rated for different audience tolerances, and haunted attractions often provide multiple experience options. This segmentation reflects the psychological reality that people have different optimal arousal levels for enjoyment. What's thrilling for a high sensation seeker might be overwhelming for someone with high anxiety sensitivity. The psychology of fear isn't just used for entertainment, it's also extensively employed in marketing and advertising. Fear appeals. Messages that attempt to motivate behavior change by highlighting negative consequences are common in advertising for everything from insurance to health products. However, the effectiveness of fear appeals depends on several psychological factors. Effective fear appeals must navigate a delicate balance. Too little fear and people won't be motivated to act. Too much fear and people become overwhelmed and defensive. The most effective fear appeals create moderate levels of fear that grab attention without overwhelming, provide clear, achievable solutions to the threatening situation, make people feel capable of implementing the recommended solutions, and offer immediate opportunities for action. Just as with entertainment fear, people respond differently to fear-based marketing. High sensation seekers might be motivated by more intense fear appeals, while anxiety-sensitive individuals might respond better to gentler approaches that emphasize security and protection. Understanding the psychology of controlled fear has led to important therapeutic applications, particularly in the treatment of anxiety disorders and phobias. Exposure therapy, one of the most effective treatments for anxiety disorders, is essentially a clinical application of controlled fear. Patients are gradually exposed to feared stimuli in safe, controlled environments, allowing them to experience the fear response while learning that the feared outcome doesn't occur. The principles underlying exposure therapy are remarkably similar to those that make recreational fear enjoyable. Controlled environment with clear safety signals, gradual increase in intensity, voluntary participation, and sense of agency. Support from trusted others, in this case therapists, and recognition that fear feelings are temporary and manageable. Based on the stress inoculation theory mentioned earlier, Some therapeutic approaches deliberately expose people to manageable stressors to build psychological resilience. Military training, emergency responder preparation, and performance psychology all use controlled stress exposure to improve functioning under pressure. Modern virtual reality technology has revolutionized exposure therapy by allowing therapists to create completely controlled, scary experiences. Virtual reality can simulate everything from flying to public speaking to encountering spiders, providing safe environments for people to confront their fears. The principles of controlled fear can also be applied to education and learning. Moderate levels of stress and arousal can enhance attention, memory, and engagement. Educational games that incorporate elements of challenge, risk, and excitement can make learning more engaging and effective. The key is finding the optimal level of challenge that creates arousal without overwhelming students. Professional training programs increasingly use realistic simulations that create controlled stress to prepare people for high-stakes situations. Medical students practice on simulation patients, pilots train in flight simulators, and emergency responders practice disaster scenarios. These simulations work because they activate the same neurobiological systems as real emergencies while maintaining safety. The stress and arousal enhance learning and memory formation, making the training more effective. Understanding the psychology of controlled fear can help people develop better emotional regulation skills and psychological resilience. People can deliberately seek out appropriately challenging and slightly scary experiences as a way to build confidence and emotional tolerance. This might involve public speaking, trying new activities, or gradually confronting avoided situations. Learning to observe and understand our fear responses can help us manage them more effectively. When people understand that fear is a normal physiological response that will naturally subside, they can navigate scary situations with greater equanimity. Seeking out controlled fear experiences with supportive others can build both individual resilience and social bonds. Whether it's joining a hiking group, taking an improv class, or watching horror movies with friends, shared challenges can be both fun and psychologically beneficial. While controlled fear can be psychologically beneficial, it can also become problematic when it escalates into compulsive or dangerous behavior. Some people develop what researchers call adrenaline addiction, a compulsive need to seek increasingly intense and risky experiences to achieve the same neurochemical high. Just as with other rewarding experiences, people can develop tolerance to fear-induced neurochemical responses. What once felt thrilling and exciting becomes routine, leading people to seek out increasingly intense experiences to achieve the same level of arousal and reward. This tolerance can lead to dangerous escalation, where people engage in genuinely risky behaviors not because they enjoy the risk itself, but because they need higher levels of stimulation to activate their reward systems. Regular engagement in controlled fear activities can sometimes lead to overconfidence and poor risk assessment in genuinely dangerous situations. People who are comfortable with managed risks might underestimate real risks, leading to accidents and injuries. For some people, fear-seeking can become so central to their identity and lifestyle that it interferes with other important life domains. They might prioritize thrill-seeking activities over work, relationships, or other responsibilities. For people who have experienced genuine trauma, engaging with frightening entertainment or experiences can sometimes trigger traumatic memories and cause psychological harm. Trauma survivors often have complicated relationships with fear and arousal. Some become hypervigilant and avoid anything that might trigger fear responses, while others become sensation-seeking, possibly as a way to feel alive or to process their traumatic experiences. The key difference between therapeutic and harmful fear experiences lies in choice and control. Voluntary controlled fear experiences can be beneficial, but involuntary or uncontrolled fear experiences can be re-traumatizing. It's important to recognize that fear-seeking isn't universally positive or desirable. Cultural values, individual temperament, and life circumstances all influence whether engaging with controlled fear is beneficial or problematic for any given person. Some cultures view deliberate fear-seeking as wasteful, dangerous, or spiritually problematic, What seems like harmless fun in one cultural context might be deeply inappropriate or offensive in another. For people with certain temperamental characteristics, high anxiety sensitivity, trauma history, or certain mental health conditions, fear-seeking activities might be more harmful than beneficial. The appropriateness of fear-seeking also depends on life circumstances. What might be developmentally normal for an adolescent might be problematic for someone with significant life responsibilities or stress. As we reach the end of our journey through the psychology of fear-seeking, let's take a moment to appreciate the remarkable complexity of what we've explored. The human relationship with fear is far from simple. It's an intricate dance between ancient evolutionary programming and modern cognitive sophistication, between individual psychology and social dynamics, between risk and reward. We've seen how our brains transform potentially threatening experiences into sources of pleasure and excitement through sophisticated neurobiological processes. We've explored how controlled fear serves important evolutionary functions, from stress inoculation to social bonding. We've examined how individual differences shape our fear preferences and how entire industries have emerged to satisfy our appetite for safe scares. Most importantly, we've learned that the human love of being scared reflects some of our species' most admirable qualities: our ability to find joy in challenge, our capacity for emotional growth and resilience, our drive to connect with others through shared intense experiences, and our remarkable talent for transforming potentially negative experiences into positive ones through the power of cognitive appraisal. Let me leave you with several key insights from our exploration. Fear is not the enemy. Rather than something to be avoided, controlled fear can be a pathway to growth, connection, and joy. The key is learning to distinguish between beneficial and harmful fear experiences. Individual differences matter. There's no right amount of fear-seeking. Some people thrive on intense, scary experiences, while others prefer gentler challenges. Understanding and respecting these differences is crucial for both personal well-being and social harmony. Context is everything. The same physiological fear response can become either traumatic or thrilling, depending on context, choice, control, and safety. Creating appropriate contexts for controlled fear is both an art and a science. Social connection amplifies benefits. While fear can be experienced alone, its benefits are often maximized in social contexts. Shared scary experiences can strengthen relationships and build community in powerful ways. Balance is essential. Like many good things in life, fear-seeking is best enjoyed in moderation. The goal is not to eliminate fear or to seek it compulsively, but to find a healthy balance that promotes growth and well-being. As we continue to learn more about the neuroscience of fear and emotion, we can expect even more sophisticated applications of this knowledge. Virtual reality technologies will create increasingly realistic controlled fear experiences. Therapeutic interventions will become more precisely tailored to individual neurobiological profiles. Entertainment experiences will become even more effective at creating the optimal balance of fear and safety. But perhaps most importantly, understanding why we love being scared can help us understand ourselves better. It reminds us that humans are not simple creatures seeking only comfort and safety. We are complex beings who find meaning and joy in challenge, growth, and the full spectrum of emotional experience. So, the next time you find yourself screaming with delight on a roller coaster, jumping at a horror movie, or feeling your heart race before giving a presentation, remember that you're participating in one of humanity's most fascinating psychological phenomena. You're experiencing the remarkable alchemy through which your ancient brain transforms fear into joy, stress into excitement, and challenge into triumph. After all, in a world that often seems designed to make us feel small and powerless, there's something profoundly empowering about voluntarily facing our fears and discovering that we can not only survive them, but actually enjoy them. That, perhaps, is the most beautiful thing about our love affair with being scared. It reminds us that we are braver, more resilient, and more capable of joy than we might otherwise believe. And with that thought, class dismissed. Try not to have nightmares, or do, if that's your thing. As we've learned today, There's really no accounting for taste when it comes to fear. Thank you and good night. And in case you've enjoyed our evening talk so much and still might be awake, here is another educational video for you. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to The Droning Professor. Tonight's lesson is about strange moons in our solar system. So as you make yourselves comfortable, dim your lights, and please take a moment to let us know where you're listening from, and feel free to subscribe. Now, as always, take a moment for some deep breaths, letting your mind and body relax for a good night of sleep. Tonight we're going on a tour of some of the most bizarre, fascinating, and downright weird moons in our solar system. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. Moons? Aren't they just boring, cratered rocks orbiting planets? Well, prepare to have your minds blown, because the moons we'll explore tonight make science fiction look mundane. Before we begin, let me ask you this. How many moons do you think exist in our solar system? 10? 20? Try over 290 confirmed moons. That's right. We've discovered nearly 300 natural satellites orbiting the planets in our cosmic neighborhood, and each one has its own story to tell. Some are stranger than anything Hollywood could dream up. Tonight, we're going to focus on the absolute weirdest of the weird. We'll meet moons that could harbor alien life, moons that are basically cosmic snowballs with more water than all of Earth's oceans, moons that look like they've been through a cosmic food processor, and moons that challenge everything we thought we knew about how celestial bodies should behave. So buckle up, because we're about to embark on a journey that will take us from the scorching volcanic hellscape of Io to the mysterious, dark hydrocarbon lakes of Titan, and everywhere in between. Let's start our tour with what I like to call the angry teenager of the solar system, Jupiter's moon Io. Discovered by Galileo in 1610, Io might look beautiful from a distance with its colorful mottled surface, but don't let that fool you. This moon is having what could be described as the longest, most violent temper tantrum in the solar system. Io is the most volcanically active body we know of anywhere in the universe. And when I say active, I mean it makes Mount Vesuvius look like a gentle hiccup. At any given time, there are typically 150 to 300 active volcanoes on Io's surface. That's more active volcanoes than exist on Earth, all crammed onto a world that's only slightly larger than our own moon. But here's where it gets really weird. These aren't your typical Earth-style volcanoes spewing out nice, familiar lava. Oh no! Io's volcanoes are throwing sulfur and sulfur dioxide hundreds of kilometers into space. Some of these volcanic plumes reach heights of 500 kilometers. That's higher than the International Space Station orbits Earth. Imagine looking up and seeing a volcanic eruption shooting material into space at 1 kilometer per second. It's like nature's own rocket launch, except it's happening constantly all over the surface. The reason for all this geological mayhem is what we call tidal heating. Jupiter's immense gravitational pull, combined with the gravitational tugs from Io's neighboring moons, Europa and Ganymede, literally kneads Io like cosmic bread dough. This constant stretching and squeezing generates enormous amounts of internal heat, so much heat that Io's interior remains molten despite being 5.2 times farther from the Sun than Earth. The result? A surface that gets completely resurfaced every million years or so. To put that in perspective, if you could somehow visit Io a million years ago, you wouldn't recognize it today. Every mountain, every plain, every feature would be completely different. It's like the moon has cosmic amnesia, constantly erasing and rewriting its own surface. And the colors! Io looks like someone took a pizza and threw it into a paint store explosion. You've got yellows, oranges, reds, whites, and blacks all swirled together in chaotic patterns. The yellow comes from sulfur, the reds and oranges from various sulfur compounds, and the white areas are probably sulfur dioxide frost. It's beautiful in a terrifying, I never want to visit there kind of way. Speaking of never wanting to visit, Io sits right in the heart of Jupiter's radiation belt. The radiation levels there are so intense that they would kill an unprotected human in minutes. Even our robotic spacecraft have to be specially hardened to survive brief flybys without their electronics getting fried. Now, let's cool down and visit Jupiter's moon Europa, and I mean that literally. While Io is a hellscape of volcanic fury, Europa is an ice world that might just be the most likely place in our solar system to find life beyond Earth. Europa is what we call a cracked egg moon. Its surface is almost entirely covered by a shell of water ice. But this isn't just any ordinary ice. We're talking about a layer that's estimated to be 15 to 25 kilometers thick. To put that in perspective, that's about twice the height of Mount Everest. But instead of rock, it's all ice. But here's the really exciting part. Beneath all that ice lies an ocean of liquid water that contains more water than all of Earth's oceans combined. Let me repeat that. Europa, which is smaller than our moon, has more water than our entire blue planet. This subsurface ocean is estimated to be 60 to 150 kilometers deep. The deepest point in Earth's oceans, the Mariana Trench, is only about 11 kilometers deep. Europa's ocean could swallow our deepest ocean trenches and still have room for more. The surface of Europa looks like someone took a cue ball and drew all over it with a fine tip marker. These dark lines crisscrossing the surface are called lineae, and they tell the story of a dynamic, active ice shell. These features form when the ice cracks due to tidal forces from Jupiter, and then darker material from below wells up to fill the cracks. Some of these lineae are hundreds of kilometers long and can be seen clearly in images from our spacecraft. What makes Europa even more intriguing is that its ocean isn't just sitting there doing nothing. The same tidal heating that drives Io's volcanoes also works on Europa, but more gently. This heating keeps the ocean liquid and may drive hydrothermal activity on the ocean floor, the same kind of activity that supports thriving ecosystems around underwater vents in Earth's deep oceans. Recent observations have even detected what appear to be water vapor plumes erupting from Europa's surface, shooting up to 200 kilometers high. These plumes might give us a way to sample Europa's ocean without having to drill through all that ice. We could potentially fly a spacecraft right through the plumes and analyze the materials they contain. The possibility of life on Europa isn't just wild speculation. The moon has 3 key ingredients that life as we know it requires: liquid water, chemical elements necessary for biology, and energy sources. On Earth, we've found life thriving in the deepest, darkest parts of our oceans, around hydrothermal vents where sunlight never penetrates. If similar environments exist on Europa, and we have good reason to think they do, then Europa's ocean could be teeming with alien microorganisms. NASA is so excited about Europa's potential that they're planning a mission called Europa Clipper, scheduled to launch in 2024, that will make dozens of close flybys of the moon to study its ice shell and subsurface ocean in unprecedented detail. We might be on the verge of answering one of humanity's biggest questions. Are we alone in the universe? Speaking of potential life in the outer solar system, let's travel from Jupiter to Saturn and meet one of the most surprising discoveries in modern planetary science: Enceladus. This little moon is only about 500 kilometers in diameter, small enough that you could drive across it in about 6 hours. But it packs more surprises per square kilometer than almost any other world we know. For most of the space age, Enceladus was dismissed as just another boring, icy moon. It was so small that scientists assumed it should have been geologically dead for billions of years. Then came the Cassini mission, and boy, were we wrong. In 2005, Cassini detected something absolutely mind-blowing: massive geysers of water ice and vapor erupting from the south polar region of Enceladus. These aren't small, gentle puffs. We're talking about geysers that shoot material hundreds of kilometers into space at speeds of up to 2,000 kilometers per hour. It's like having a cosmic fire hose pointed at space, running continuously. The source of these geysers is a series of parallel fissures near the South Pole that scientists playfully nicknamed tiger stripes. These 4 main fractures, officially named Alexandria, Baghdad, Cairo, and Damascus Sulci, are about 130 kilometers long, 2 kilometers wide, and run roughly parallel to each other. They're warmer than the surrounding terrain, indicating active geological processes beneath. But here's where Enceladus gets really exciting. that geyser material isn't just water ice. Cassini flew right through the plumes and analyzed their composition, discovering that they contain salt, organic compounds, and even tiny silica particles that could only form in hydrothermal environments. In other words, Enceladus has a warm, salty ocean beneath its icy crust, and that ocean is in contact with a rocky core where hydrothermal chemistry is taking place. The implications are staggering. On Earth, hydrothermal vents on the ocean floor support some of the most diverse and robust ecosystems on our planet. These environments are so rich with life that some scientists think they might be where life on Earth first evolved. If similar processes are occurring in Enceladus's ocean, this tiny moon could be harboring an entire alien biosphere. What makes Enceladus even more remarkable is how it maintains its geological activity. Like Europa, tidal heating plays a role, but Enceladus is much smaller and should have cooled off long ago. The fact that it's still so active suggests there might be additional energy sources we don't fully understand yet, or that its internal structure is more complex than we initially thought. The geysers of Enceladus actually supply material to one of Saturn's rings, the E ring. So in a very real sense, Enceladus is constantly feeding Saturn's ring system with fresh ice particles. It's like the moon is slowly evaporating into space, creating one of the most beautiful ring features in the solar system. Now, let's visit what might be the most alien world in our solar system that's still somehow familiar: Saturn's largest moon, Titan. If you could somehow survive on its surface, and I emphasize if because it would kill you in multiple ways, Titan would feel eerily similar to a primordial Earth, albeit one that's been dunked in liquid nitrogen and had all the water replaced with hydrocarbons. Titan is huge, larger than Mercury and the second largest moon in the solar system after Jupiter's Ganymede. But size isn't what makes Titan special. It's the fact that it's the only moon in our solar system with a substantial atmosphere. And when I say substantial, I mean it. Titan's atmosphere is 50% denser than Earth's. If you stood on Titan's surface, you'd experience about 1.45 times the atmospheric pressure you feel at sea level on Earth. But here's the kicker. That thick atmosphere is mostly nitrogen, just like Earth's, but with one crucial difference. Instead of oxygen as the second most abundant gas, Titan has methane. Lots and lots of methane. This creates one of the most bizarre and fascinating environments in the solar system. On Titan, it rains methane. Not metaphorically, literally. Liquid methane falls from methane clouds in a methane sky onto a landscape carved by flowing methane rivers that empty into methane lakes and seas. It's like Earth's water cycle, but with hydrocarbons instead of H2O. The largest of these hydrocarbon seas, Kraken Mare, is larger than the Caspian Sea and contains more liquid hydrocarbons than all of Earth's oil and natural gas reserves combined. The Cassini-Huygens mission gave us unprecedented views of this alien world. The Huygens probe actually landed on Titan's surface in 2005, becoming the most distant landing ever achieved by humanity at that time. The images it sent back showed a landscape that looked hauntingly familiar: rolling hills, drainage channels, and what appeared to be a shoreline, but all carved by liquid methane instead of water. Titan's surface temperature hovers around -179 degrees Celsius, or -290 degrees Fahrenheit, cold enough that water ice is as hard as granite. In fact, on Titan, water ice plays the role that rock plays on Earth. The rocks you'd pick up on Titan would actually be chunks of water ice, while liquid hydrocarbons flow over and around them. But perhaps the most intriguing aspect of Titan is its potential for prebiotic chemistry. The moon's atmosphere is rich in organic compounds, the building blocks of life as we know it. Solar radiation and charged particles from Saturn's magnetosphere are constantly driving complex chemical reactions in Titan's atmosphere, creating a smorgasbord of organic molecules that rain down onto the surface. Some scientists have speculated about the possibility of life on Titan, but it would have to be unlike anything we know. This hypothetical life would use liquid methane as a solvent instead of water, and might metabolize hydrogen instead of oxygen. It's the kind of alternative biochemistry that pushes the boundaries of what we consider possible for life. Recent studies have even suggested that Titan might have a subsurface ocean of liquid water beneath its icy crust, similar to Europa and Enceladus. So Titan could potentially host two completely different types of life: familiar water-based life in its subsurface ocean and exotic hydrocarbon-based life on its surface. Talk about having your cake and eating it too. Let's journey to the outer edge of the solar system to meet one of the most peculiar moons of all, Neptune's largest moon, Triton. This moon is so strange that everything about it seems to violate the rules of how moons should behave. First, let's talk about Triton's most obvious oddity. It orbits backwards. I'm not joking. While almost every other large moon in the solar system orbits in the same direction as their planet's rotation, Triton goes the wrong way. It has what we call a retrograde orbit, meaning it orbits Neptune in the opposite direction from Neptune's rotation. It's like being the one car driving the wrong way on a highway. This backwards orbit tells us something fascinating about Triton's origin. Large moons that form alongside their planets always orbit in the same direction as the planet rotates. The fact that Triton doesn't means it didn't form where it is now. It was captured. Triton is almost certainly a former Kuiper Belt object, similar to Pluto, that got too close to Neptune and was gravitationally captured billions of years ago. This capture event was probably catastrophic for Neptune's original moon system. Triton's retrograde orbit would have created chaos, likely destroying or ejecting most of Neptune's other moons. It's like Triton was a cosmic wrecking ball that completely reorganized Neptune's neighborhood when it arrived. But here's where Triton gets even weirder. Despite being so far from the Sun that it receives 900 times less sunlight than Earth, this moon is geologically active. When Voyager 2 flew by in 1989, it discovered nitrogen geysers erupting from Triton's south polar region. These geysers shoot dark material up to 8 kilometers high, creating long, dark streaks across the moon's icy surface. Think about how remarkable this is. Triton is 30 times farther from the Sun than Earth, receiving so little solar energy that its surface temperature is a frigid negative 235 degrees Celsius, or negative 391 degrees Fahrenheit. Yet somehow, it has enough internal energy to drive active geology. The leading theory is that seasonal heating of the thin nitrogen atmosphere creates greenhouse effects that can trigger these explosive eruptions. Triton's surface is a patchwork of different terrains that tell the story of a geologically complex world. There are areas of cantaloupe terrain, weird, bumpy regions that look like the skin of a melon. There are smooth plains that might be relatively young nitrogen ice flows. There are ridges and valleys that suggest tectonic activity. For a moon that should be a frozen, inactive ice ball, Triton shows remarkable geological diversity. The moon also has an extremely thin atmosphere composed primarily of nitrogen, with trace amounts of methane. This atmosphere is so tenuous that it's barely there, about 70,000 times thinner than Earth's, but it's enough to support weather phenomena and seasonal changes. Perhaps most poignantly, Triton is doomed. That retrograde orbit that makes it so interesting is also sealing its fate. Tidal forces between Neptune and Triton are gradually slowing down the moon's orbital motion, causing it to spiral slowly inward toward the planet. In about 3.6 billion years, Triton will either crash into Neptune or be torn apart by tidal forces, potentially creating a spectacular ring system around Neptune. Saturn has many strange moons, but Iapetus might just be the weirdest of them all. This moon looks like someone took two completely different worlds and somehow fused them together, creating a cosmic yin-yang symbol that has puzzled scientists for centuries. The most obvious oddity about Iapetus is its two-tone coloration. One hemisphere is as dark as charcoal, reflecting only about 4% of the sunlight that hits it. The other hemisphere is bright white, reflecting about 60% of incoming light. The contrast is so stark that Giovanni Cassini, who discovered Iapetus in 1671, could only see it when the bright side was facing Earth. He thought the moon was disappearing and reappearing as it orbited Saturn. This dramatic color difference isn't just a surface coating. It appears to go deep into the moon's structure. The dark material, which scientists call Cassini Regio, after the moon's discoverer, covers about 1/3 of Iapetus's surface. The leading theory is that this material comes from other moons in Saturn's system, particularly the distant moon Phoebe, which also has a dark, carbon-rich surface. Here's how it probably works. Phoebe, which orbits in the opposite direction from most of Saturn's other moons, is constantly being sandblasted by micrometeoroids. This knocks dark material off Phoebe's surface, creating a tenuous ring of dark particles around Saturn. Iapetus, as it orbits through this ring, collects the dark material on its leading hemisphere, like a car windshield collecting bugs on a highway. But wait, it gets weirder. Iapetus has something that no other moon in the solar system possesses, a massive equatorial ridge that runs about 2/3 of the way around the moon's circumference. This ridge is enormous, up to 20 kilometers high and 60 kilometers wide in some places. To put that in perspective, that's more than twice as high as Mount Everest, running in an almost perfectly straight line around the moon's equator. This ridge gives Iapetus a distinctive walnut-like appearance that's unlike anything else we've seen in the solar system. Scientists are still debating how it formed. Some theories suggest it's the remains of a collapsed ring system that somehow fell onto the moon's surface. Others propose that it formed when Iapetus was spinning much faster in its early history, creating a bulge that solidified as the moon slowed down. Adding to the mystery, Iapetus has an extremely low density, about 1.1 times that of water. This suggests it's mostly made of water ice with only a small rocky core. For such a low-density object to maintain such a dramatic topographic feature as the equatorial ridge is quite surprising and adds to the moon's enigmatic nature. Iapetus orbits Saturn at a great distance, farther out than any of Saturn's other major moons. This distant orbit, combined with its large size of about 1,470 kilometers in diameter, gives it a unique perspective on the Saturn system. It's like the distant observer of Saturn's family of moons, slowly circling the planet every 79 days. Let's come back closer to home and visit Mars's two tiny oddball moons, Phobos and Deimos, named after the Greek gods of fear and panic, which is fitting, considering how weird they are. These moons are so small and irregularly shaped that they look more like asteroids than proper moons, which is probably exactly what they are. Phobos, the larger and inner moon, is only about 22 kilometers across at its widest point. It's so small that if you could somehow stand on its surface, you could probably throw a baseball right off the moon and into space. Its gravity is so weak, about 1/1000th of Earth's, that you'd weigh about as much as a paperclip. But here's the really strange part about Phobos. It orbits Mars faster than Mars rotates. This means that 3 of Jupiter's 4 largest moons, Europa, Ganymede, and Callisto, likely contain more liquid water than exists on Earth. Jupiter's system alone might contain several times more liquid water than our home planet, all hidden beneath icy crusts in the cold outer solar system. The Galilean moons also demonstrate a beautiful example of orbital resonance. Io, Europa, and Ganymede are locked in a 4:2:1 resonance. For every 4 orbits Io completes, Europa completes exactly 2, and Ganymede completes exactly 1. This precise gravitational choreography has been maintained for billions of years and is responsible for the tidal heating that drives Io's volcanism and keeps Europa's ocean liquid. Our solar system contains so many strange moons that we couldn't possibly cover them all in detail, but let's give honorable mentions to a few other notable oddities. Epimetheus and Janus are Saturn's co-orbital moons that literally swap orbits every 4 years. They chase each other around Saturn in nearly identical orbits, and when the inner moon catches up to the outer one, their gravitational interaction causes them to exchange positions. It's like a cosmic dance that's been going on for millions of years. Nereid, Neptune's 3rd largest moon, has one of the most eccentric orbits of any moon in the solar system. Its distance from Neptune varies from 1.4 million kilometers to 9.6 million kilometers, as it follows its highly elongated 360-day orbit. This extreme orbit suggests that Nereid might be a captured Kuiper Belt object, like Triton. Phoebe, Saturn's outermost large moon, orbits backwards and is thought to be a captured centaur, a type of small body from the outer solar system. It's the source of Saturn's largest and most diffuse ring, the Phoebe ring, which wasn't discovered until 2009. Proteus, Neptune's second largest moon, is about as large as an object can be while still maintaining an irregular shape. It's right at the limit where its own gravity would normally pull it into a sphere, making it a cosmic example of an object balanced on the edge between small body and proper moon. Our tour of strange moons wouldn't be complete without acknowledging that we're still discovering new ones all the time. In just the past few years, astronomers have discovered dozens of new moons around the giant planets, bringing our total count to nearly 300 known moons in the solar system. Many of these newly discovered moons are tiny, just a few kilometers across, and orbit at great distances from their planets. They're probably captured asteroids or comet nuclei that got gravitationally snagged by the giant planets. Some of them have such eccentric and inclined orbits that they spend most of their time far from their parent planets, only occasionally swooping in close during their years-long orbits. Jupiter currently holds the record with 95 known moons, followed by Saturn with 146. These numbers keep changing as we discover new tiny moons and sometimes lose track of others. Some of these small, distant moons are so faint that we can barely detect them even with our best telescopes. Advanced sky surveys and improved detection techniques are constantly revealing new members of planetary moon families. Each new discovery adds to our understanding of how the solar system formed and evolved, and how gravitational capture processes work in the outer solar system. As we conclude our tour, it's worth reflecting on what makes these moons so fascinating and strange. In many cases, it's because they violate our expectations based on their size, location, or apparent simplicity. Small moons like Enceladus and Mimas shouldn't be geologically active, yet they are. Distant moons like Triton shouldn't have atmospheres and active geology, yet they do. Simple ice balls like Europa shouldn't harbor vast oceans teeming with potential for life, yet they might. These moons force us to constantly revise our understanding of how planetary systems work. They show us that the solar system is far more dynamic, diverse, and potentially habitable than we ever imagined when we first started exploring beyond Earth. They also remind us that some of the most interesting science happens at the boundaries, at the edges of what we think is possible. The strange moons are often the ones that teach us the most about planetary science, astrobiology, and the fundamental processes that shape worlds. Many of the moons we've discussed today, Europa, Enceladus, Titan, and potentially others, are now considered among the most promising places to search for life in our solar system. This represents a fundamental shift in our thinking about habitability. For most of human history, we assumed that life required conditions similar to Earth: moderate temperatures, liquid water on the surface, and energy from a nearby star. The strange moons of the outer solar system have taught us that life might thrive in environments that are completely alien to us. Subsurface oceans warmed by tidal heating could support ecosystems that never see sunlight. Hydrocarbon lakes on worlds like Titan could potentially host completely different forms of biochemistry. The building blocks of life, organic compounds, liquid solvents, and energy sources, might be far more common throughout the solar system than we ever dreamed. This has profound implications for the search for life beyond our solar system. If moons like Europa and Enceladus can potentially harbor life, then the billions of exoplanets we've discovered might each have multiple moons, dramatically increasing the number of potentially habitable worlds in our galaxy. The strange moons we've discussed tonight are high-priority targets for future space missions. NASA's Europa Clipper mission, launching in 2024, will conduct detailed studies of Europa's ice shell and subsurface ocean. The European Space Agency's JUICE mission will study Jupiter's icy moons, including Ganymede, Europa, and Callisto. There are also proposed missions to Enceladus, Titan, Triton, and other exotic moons. Some of these missions would not just fly by or orbit these worlds, but actually land on their surfaces or even dive through their subsurface oceans. The technology for exploring these strange worlds is advancing rapidly. We're developing ice-penetrating probes that could melt through Europa's ice shell to sample its ocean directly. We're designing submarines that could explore Titan's methane seas. We're creating spacecraft that could sample the geyser plumes of Enceladus without ever landing on the surface. As we conclude our journey through the strangest moons in our solar system, I hope you're as amazed as I am by the sheer diversity and wonder of these worlds. From the volcanic hellscape of Io to the mysterious subsurface oceans of Europa, from the hydrocarbon lakes of Titan to the backwards, geysering oddity of Triton, each of these moons tells a unique story about the processes that shape worlds. These aren't just distant academic curiosities, they're potential laboratories for understanding life, geology, and planetary evolution. They're reminders that our universe is far stranger, more dynamic, and more potentially habitable than we ever imagined. Every time we send a spacecraft to explore these worlds, we discover things that surprise us, challenge our assumptions, and force us to expand our understanding of what's possible. The blurry dots in our telescopes turn out to be complex, fascinating worlds with their own weather, geology, and potentially even biology. As you leave class tonight, I want you to remember that we live in an age of unprecedented exploration and discovery. The strange moons we've discussed are not just subjects in a textbook, they're real places that human-made spacecraft have visited, photographed, and studied in detail. Some of you in this room might even work on future missions to these worlds. The next time you look up at the night sky, remember that out there, beyond the planets we can see with our naked eyes, are hundreds of worlds as diverse and fascinating as anything in science fiction. And we're just getting started in exploring them. The universe is vast, strange, and wonderful, and these bizarre moons are proof that reality is often far more amazing than anything we could imagine. And in case you've enjoyed our evening talk so much and still might be awake, here is another educational video for you.